For centuries, the people of the small valley village of Elderglen believed they had been blessed by the mountains that surrounded them. The rivers were clear, the fields were rich, and the forests provided everything they needed to survive. Children played near the old stone bridge. Farmers sang while working under the golden sun, and every evening the villagers gathered around warm fires to share stories of their ancestors. But everything changed on the night the sky turned red. The first sign was not the roar, it was the silence. The birds stopped singing. The wolves disappeared deep into the woods. Even the wind seemed afraid to move through the trees. The villagers noticed that the animals had fled before they understood why. Then the ground began to shake. At first, everyone thought it was an earthquake. Plates fell from shelves, houses trembled, and the old wooden doors of Elderglen slammed open and closed. People ran outside, looking toward the mountains where dark clouds covered the highest peaks. And then they saw it, a shadow larger than any creature they had ever imagined moved across the moon. A dragon, not the kind from the old tales told to children, not a beautiful creature with shining scales and gentle eyes. This was a monster born from fire and darkness. Its wings covered the stars as it descended from the mountains, and its scales reflected the flames that burned inside its enormous body. The dragon landed on the highest hill overlooking Elderglen and released a roar so powerful that windows shattered throughout the village. Everyone froze. The elders remembered stories that had been forgotten for generations. They spoke of an ancient dragon that once ruled the land before humans built their homes there. A creature that was said to return whenever the balance between nature and mankind was broken. The villagers called it Dravok, the dragon of the burning sky. That night, Dravok flew over the village, breathing fire into the empty fields outside the houses. It did not attack the people. It did not destroy their homes. And somehow, that made it even more terrifying, because it felt like a warning. The next morning, the people of Elderglen discovered strange marks burned into the ground near the edge of the forest. They looked like symbols, but no one understood their meaning. The dragon had left a message, and the villagers feared they had been chosen for something terrible. Days passed, and Dravok returned every night. The villagers stopped leaving their homes after sunset. The marketplace became empty. The laughter of children disappeared. The sound of doors locking echoed through the streets as families prepared for another night of fear. The dragon had not destroyed Elderglen, it had trapped it. Farmers stopped working in distant fields because they feared the dragon would see them. Hunters refused to enter the forest. Travelers avoided the roads near the valley. Slowly, the village that had once been full of life became a place where everyone whispered. But among all the frightened villagers, one person refused to believe that fear was the only answer. Her name was Elara. Elara was a young woman who had grown up listening to the legends of dragons, heroes, and forgotten kingdoms. Unlike the others, she noticed something strange about Dravok. The dragon always attacked empty places. It never harmed a person. It never burned a home. It always returned to the mountains after leaving its mysterious symbols behind. Everyone called Dravok a monster. But Elara wondered if there was a reason behind its actions. One evening, while the village prepared for another night of hiding, Elara climbed the old tower at the center of Elderglen. From there, she watched the mountains where the dragon lived. The moon was bright, and the air was cold. Then she saw two glowing eyes appear in the darkness. Dravok was watching her. For several moments neither of them moved. The entire village slept below, unaware that the girl they considered foolish was standing face to face with the creature they feared most. Ilara expected the dragon to attack, but it did not. Instead, Dravok slowly lowered its enormous head and looked directly at her. And for the first time, Ilara saw something she never expected. The dragon was not angry. It was waiting, as if it had been searching for someone who would finally listen. Then Dravok opened its mouth and spoke a single sentence that changed everything. "Your village is in greater danger than you know." Before Ilara could answer, the dragon disappeared into the darkness, leaving only ashes and a question behind. What could possibly frighten a creature like Dravok? And why had it chosen her? Ilara spent the entire night awake, thinking about the dragon's words. "Your village is in greater danger than you know." The sentence repeated in her mind again and again. By sunrise, she had convinced herself that she needed answers. She could not continue pretending that Dravok was just a monster. There was something hidden behind the attacks, something the villagers did not understand. But when Ilara told the village elders what had happened, they refused to believe her. "A dragon spoke to you?" one of them asked with disbelief. "You must have been dreaming," another replied. "Dragons do not warn humans," said the oldest elder. "They only bring destruction." The villagers listened, but fear had already controlled their minds. They did not want another explanation. They wanted a simple enemy they could hate, a monster, a reason for their suffering. And Dravok was the perfect answer. The village began preparing a plan to destroy the dragon. They collected weapons, sharpened blades, and repaired the old armor that had been stored beneath the town hall for generations. The strongest hunters volunteered to climb the mountain and kill the creature before it could attack again. Everyone celebrated the idea. Everyone except Ilara. She knew something was wrong. If Dravok wanted to destroy Elderglen, it would have done so already. The dragon had the power to burn every house, every field, and every person in the village. But it had not. It was trying to communicate. That evening, while the villagers prepared for battle, Ilara secretly left the village and followed the path toward the mountains. She needed to find Dravok before the hunters did. The journey was dangerous. The forest became darker as she walked deeper into the trees. Strange noises surrounded her, and the ancient branches seemed to move as if the forest itself was watching her. Hours passed. The road became almost impossible to follow. Then Ilara found something unexpected, a trail of burned trees. At first, she thought the dragon had destroyed the forest. But as she followed the trail, she noticed something strange. The trees were burned in a pattern. The flames had not spread randomly. Dravok had burned only the trees that were already dying. The rest of the forest remained untouched. Ilara continued walking until she reached a hidden valley behind the mountains. And there she discovered the truth. Dravok's home was not a cave filled with treasure, as the old stories claimed. It was a place of ancient ruins. Broken statues covered the ground. Old stone towers stood forgotten beneath vines and moss. Symbols identical to the ones near Elderglen covered the walls. This was not a dragon's lair. It was the remains of an ancient civilization, a civilization that had existed long before the village. As Ilara walked through the ruins, she found something that made her stop. A stone tablet. On it was carved a story. The story of Dravok. Long ago, the dragon had not been a destroyer. It had been a guardian. It protected the valley from a terrible force buried beneath the mountains, a force created by ancient magic, a darkness that grew stronger when humans damaged the natural balance of the land. Elara touched the carvings, trying to understand. Then she heard a deep voice behind her. "You finally see the truth." She turned. Dravok stood at the entrance of the ruins. This time, she was not afraid. "Why did you frighten the village?" Elara asked. The dragon lowered its head. "Because they stopped listening." The flames inside Dravok's body burned brighter. "For many years, humans have taken from this valley without giving anything back. They cut the forests. They poisoned the rivers. They awakened what was sleeping beneath the mountains." Elara looked toward the dark peaks. "What is beneath the mountains?" Before Dravok could answer, the ground began to shake. The same terrifying sound that had appeared on the night of the first attack returned. But this time, it was stronger. The rocks around them cracked. A deep roar came from beneath the earth, and even Dravok stepped backward. For the first time, Elara saw fear in the dragon's eyes. Something was rising, something older than the village, older than the dragon itself. A shadow began spreading from the cracks in the mountain, covering the stone and turning everything it touched into black dust. Dravok looked at Elara. "The darkness has awakened." The dragon's voice became urgent. "And now, if we fail, Elderglen will not be destroyed by me." A massive crack opened across the mountain. The sky turned black. The villagers who had prepared to fight Dravok looked toward the mountains and realized they had made a terrible mistake. The dragon had never been their enemy. It had been protecting them. But they had wasted their time hunting the only creature that could save them. The hunters reached the mountain at the worst possible moment. They saw Dravok standing beside Elara and immediately raised their weapons. "Stay away from her!" shouted one of them. Dravok turned toward them. For a moment, Elara feared the dragon would attack, but instead, Dravok said something no human expected to hear. "We do not have time to fight each other." Another explosion shook the mountain. The darkness was coming closer, and every second brought it nearer to the village. Elara realized that saving Elderglen would require something impossible. The villagers and the dragon would have to trust each other. But how could humans trust the creature they had feared for so long? And how could a dragon forgive the people who had spent days trying to destroy it? The answer would decide the fate of everyone in the valley. The darkness continued spreading through the mountains. Every few seconds the ground shook harder. Rocks fell from the cliffs. Trees collapsed into the valley, and a strange cold wind swept across the land. The villagers stood frozen. For days they had prepared themselves to fight a dragon. They had imagined themselves as heroes who would save Elderglen by defeating the creature that terrified them. But now they understood the truth. The dragon had never been the greatest danger. It had been the only thing standing between them and something far worse. The oldest elder slowly lowered his weapon. "We were wrong," he whispered. "No," one answered, because everyone knew it. They had judged Dravok before understanding him. They had allowed fear to replace reason. Elara stepped forward. "If we keep fighting each other, the village will fall," she said. "The dragon tried to warn us. We have one chance left." The hunters looked at Dravok. The villagers looked at the mountains, and for the first time in many years, humans and dragons stood on the same side. Dravok turned toward the opening in the mountain. The darkness below is called the Hollow Shadow, the dragon explained. Long ago it was sealed away by the first guardians of this valley, but the seal has weakened. How do we stop it? Alara asked. Dravok looked at the ancient ruins. The seal must be restored. Everyone waited, but only a guardian of the valley can activate it. The villagers looked at the dragon. You, said one of the hunters. Dravok slowly shook his head. My power is not enough anymore. Silence filled the valley. Then Alara remembered the stone tablet. The first guardians were not dragons. They were humans and dragons together. The seal had never belonged to one species. It belonged to those willing to protect the land. The village has to help, Alara said. The others stared at her. How? The same way the first guardians did. She pointed toward the ruins. Together. There was no time for hesitation. The villagers followed Alara and Dravok back to the ancient ruins. The journey that had once seemed impossible became their only hope. Farmers carried tools. Hunters carried weapons. The elders carried the knowledge passed down through generations. And Dravok used his enormous strength to clear the path through the collapsing mountains. For the first time, the villagers saw the dragon not as a monster, but as a protector. The creature they feared was risking everything to save them. When they reached the ruins, the darkness arrived. It rose from the mountain like a living storm. It had no face, no body, only endless shadows that moved like smoke and swallowed everything in their path. The villagers panicked. Some wanted to run, but Alara stood in front of them. If we run now, we lose everything. The shadow moved closer. The ancient stones began to crack. Dravok stepped forward and released a powerful stream of fire toward the darkness. For a moment, it worked. The shadows pushed backward, but then the darkness grew stronger. The flames disappeared inside it. Dravok fell back. The dragon was exhausted. The villagers realized something terrifying. Even Dravok could not defeat it alone. Alara looked at the ruins. The symbols on the walls began glowing. She remembered the words carved into the stone. Strength is not found in one heart. It is created when many hearts choose the same path. She understood. The seal was not activated by power. It was activated by unity. Eliminate your fear, she told the villagers. The dragon needs us. Slowly, one by one, the villagers stepped forward. The hunters placed their weapons on the ground. The elders began reading the ancient words. The villagers placed their hands on the stone walls. And Dravok stood beside them. The darkness attacked. A wave of shadows rushed toward them. But this time, the valley did not face it with fear. It faced it with courage. The ruins exploded with light. The symbols on the walls spread across the ground, forming a giant circle around the village, the people, and the dragon. The hollow shadow screamed. The sound echoed through the mountains. It tried to break through. It tried to consume them. But the combined strength of humans and dragon was stronger. The seal began closing. The darkness became smaller, until finally it disappeared. The mountains became silent. The black clouds vanished. The sun returned to Elderglen. For a moment, nobody moved. Everyone waited for another attack, another disaster, another reason to be afraid. But nothing happened. The valley was peaceful again. The villagers looked at Dravok. The dragon looked back at them. After everything that had happened, nobody knew what to say. Then the oldest elder walked forward. He placed his hand over his heart and bowed. "We called you a monster." Dravok remained silent. "We feared you because we never tried to understand you." The dragon looked toward the village. "And now?" The elder looked at the people behind him. "Now we know the truth." A small smile appeared on the old man's face. "You were never the beast in the mountains." Dravok looked at Alara, the girl who had listened when everyone else refused, the girl who had changed the fate of an entire village. From that day forward, Elderglen changed forever. The villagers rebuilt their homes, but they also rebuilt their relationship with the land. They protected the forests. They cared for the rivers. And every year they remembered the night when fear almost destroyed them. The night when they discovered that the greatest danger was not always the creature standing in front of them. Sometimes the greatest danger was the fear they carried inside. As for Dravok, the dragon remained in the mountains, but he was no longer a legend of terror. He became a guardian once again, and whenever children looked toward the peaks and saw the shadow of enormous wings crossing the sky, they no longer hid. They smiled, because they knew the dragon was watching over them, and they knew one more thing. Not every monster is evil, and not every hero looks like a hero. The story of Dravok and Elderglen was remembered for generations, not because of the dragon's power, but because of the lesson it left behind. The villagers learned that fear can create enemies where there are only misunderstandings. They saw a creature covered in fire and shadows and immediately believed it was evil. They judged Dravok by his appearance, by the stories they had heard, and by the fear that had been passed down through generations. But they never asked the most important question: what if we are wrong? Sometimes the things we fear the most are not trying to hurt us. Sometimes they are trying to warn us, protect us, or guide us toward a truth we are not ready to accept. Dravok taught Elderglen that real courage is not the absence of fear. Real courage is choosing to search for the truth even when fear tells you to run. Alara proved that one person willing to listen can change the fate of many, and the villagers discovered that the strongest bonds are not created by fighting a common enemy, but by learning to understand one another. Because, in the end, the greatest monsters are not always the creatures that live in the darkness. Sometimes they are the fears we allow to control our hearts. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones we almost never gave a chance. If this story captured your imagination, there's much more to come. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Until next time, take care and keep wondering.